Well, hey there, Blues fans. Excuse me, Grooves Blues Reviews here again, and thought I might as well go ahead and give a little update here on my thoughts about the Mike Yeo firing, which of course happened late last night, and then of course a interesting press conference today, nonetheless. But first off, let's go ahead and talk about the Mike Yeo firing. Just a little bit of history here. I mean, Mike Yeo, he 2 seasons ago came in as the coach in waiting, and that's how he was hired on because Ken Hitchcock had basically told Doug Armstrong that he only wanted to coach one more year. And then, of course, the Blues had a stellar season, and they went on to all the way to the Western Conference Finals, and unfortunately were eliminated by the San Jose Sharks. And then that following season, they started out pretty well for Ken Hitchcock team out of all of them that were here in St. Louis under Ken Hitchcock, but then started to have a slide, and they decided to get rid of Ken Hitchcock and bring in Mike Yeo, and he went on a great run towards the end of that season, got the Blues back in right form, and they went on to the playoffs, and they won the first playoff series against Mike Yeo's old team, the Minnesota Wild, and then they lost to the eventual Western Conference champions, the Nashville Predators. That following season, of course, last season, the Blues had the best start in franchise history, but somehow along the way they managed to screw everything up and end up not making the playoffs. During, of course, last season, there were two key moments, I think. We had a 7-game winless streak, and then we also had a 4-game winless streak. The 7-game winless streak came right, there in the month of February, and we were outscored 29-10. And then that 4-game losing streak towards the tail end of the season, where if we wouldn't have lost those 4 games after we had already won 6 in a row, 4 being in overtime, we probably would have made the playoffs that year. But to lose 4, and especially to lose that 4-game losing streak to an Arizona team that was horrible, not playing for anything, and we lose 6-0 to them, lose to Chicago 4-3 in the last seconds of the game at home, for a Chicago team that knew they were eliminated from the playoffs. And then also to lose to a Washington Capitals team at home, who the night before we had played that game was celebrating because they had clinched. So they knew they were going to the playoffs. They had celebrated the night before. They were tired, and they still beat us. Just horrible. And the thing about it, too, is that in that season, for some reason, when Jane Schwartz got injured in that 6-1 win in Detroit in December last season, after that, it just went downhill from there. And it was hard to understand how one player getting injured, how that could have such an effect. But it did, and therefore the Blues ended up not making the playoffs. And then, of course, that brings us to this season. And we start out with a 5-1 loss in the home opener. And then it was a third-period collapse on the road to Montreal. A total domination by against Toronto, who was the number 1 team at the time. But then we come back and have a third-period collapse against Winnipeg. And then we have a very embarrassing home loss to Columbus, 7-4, and they were booed off the ice the first time really bad at home. We lose to Minnesota and booed off the ice again at home, 5-1. We were completely dominated in that game. And then, when you look at the last 6 games, we allowed 11 goals, but only scored 10. We also were 0 for 16 on the power play. We haven't been able to come back and win a game in the third period after trailing after 2. And the final straw, the nail in the coffin for Mike Yeo, was that 2-0 loss a couple nights ago to the LA Kings, who of course were the worst team in the league, and it just was another horrible performance. Then you come to today in the press conference by Doug Armstrong, and of course. He said some interesting things today. He said, of course, the equity of the core is gone, meaning the core players. Understandable, but Doug, when are you going to do something and actually move and make it so and make these players understand that it's not going to be tolerated anymore? That the players that are on this team still that have gone through a firing of Davis Payne, Ken Hitchcock, and now Mike Yeo, that they're really more of the problem. Definitely coaching is an issue here, and there had to be a change. I agree. But some of these players, I don't understand what it's going to take to motivate them anymore. It also kind of makes me wonder, as far as the coaching goes for Yeo, did he change his system style to fit the players that Armstrong got over the summer? Or did he just stick with what he thought was a good system and expected these players to adapt to it? Because there's been nothing but running around in their own zone. Offense is now the poor thing. It was a good offense at the beginning of the year, and it was bad defense. Now that's switched. Goaltending has had its up and down issues last year and this year. And then, of course, another thing Doug Armstrong said in the press conference today, that the front of the net was open like a 7-Eleven. He's absolutely right. Countless times this season where in games when they would show replays of a goal being scored, the defenseman, most of the time Bouwmeester, but a lot of times other defensemen too, would be in front of the net, but the opposing team had a player that was behind them scoring the goal, deflecting it, whatever. We just don't clear the front of the net. And if you're not going to do that, what is the goalie supposed to think here? I mean, it's ridiculous. So it's right now, something had to be done. I think it had to be done a little bit earlier, but it had to be done. Hate to see Mike Yeo lose his job, but there needed to be a change. I just don't know how many more times we're going to see coaches get ran out of town and see if it works to fix the problem here. It's just getting ridiculous. I think right now, looking at this team, if you look at last year, we had good defense, but we had poor offense, and the goaltending was up and down. This year we started out with bad defense, but we had very good offense. And then now it's done the reversal, but we're still having up and down goaltending. So if you look at last year and so far this season, the common theme that comes up is that there's not great goaltending. And so I think goaltending really has to be assessed. But also, too, there has to be a way to find a coach or find a way to get these players to come together to play the 200-foot game. And what that means is that to play together 60 solid minutes where the defensemen are playing right on defense, jumping into the play on offense when they need to, and then the forwards are getting back to back check, and that their gap closure is so much better in the neutral zone, clogging up the lanes, blocking shots. They're just not putting it all together, and I'm not sure why that is. These players, some nights there's the effort, some nights there's not, and I just don't understand it. This roster was built by Doug Armstrong to win, and instead they're losing, and it's just sad to see. So we'll start to see tomorrow night where this is going to go, and it's going to be a tough challenge as the Blues take on the Predators tomorrow night. We'll revisit then and talk about that. But right now, according to the season, I give this team an F. It's an F, and hopefully the next quarter they can bring it up more. But an F right now, and it just doesn't look good. So we'll go from there. Starting tomorrow night against Nashville, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.